Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I'm sitting inside because the landscapers are outside today mowing all the lawns in our neighborhood, and it's very loud, and they're working very, very hard in the heat. So I wanted to do something inside so that we could have a peaceful and calm discussion. And I also want to read a meditation to get this started. I actually got a fantastic question on one of my last videos that I did, and it really made me think a lot, and I looked up some stuff too, because I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting question. So I want to talk about that in just a second, but before I do, I want to read this meditation that I have opened from The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beatty, and the meditation is for today, and it's July 26th, and it is called Owning Our Power. Don't you see, we do not have to be so victimized by life, by people, by situations, by work, by our friends, by our love relationships, by our family, by ourselves, our feelings, our thoughts, our circumstances. We are not victims. We do not have to be victims. That is the whole point. Yes, admitting and accepting powerlessness is important, but that is a first step, an introduction to this business of recovery. Later comes owning our power, changing what we can. This is as important as admitting and accepting powerlessness, and there is so much we can change. We can own our power wherever we are, wherever we are, wherever we go, whoever we are with. We do not have to stand there with our hands tied, groveling helplessly, submitting to whatever comes along. There are things we can do. We can speak up, solve the problems, use the problem to motivate ourselves to do something good for ourselves. We can make ourselves feel good. We can walk away. We can come back on our own terms. We can stand up for ourselves. We can refuse to let others control and manipulate us. We can do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. That is the beauty, the reward, the crown of victory we are given in this process called recovery. It is what it is all about. If we can't do anything about the circumstance, we can change our attitude. We can do the work within, courageously face our issues, so we are not victimized. We have been given a miraculous key to life. We are victims no more unless we want to be. Freedom and joy are ours for the taking, for the feeling, for the hard work we have done. Today I will remind myself as often as necessary that I am not a victim, and I do not need to be victimized by whatever comes my way. I will work hard to remove myself as a victim, whether that means setting and enforcing a boundary, walking away, dealing with my feelings, or giving myself what I need. God, help me let go of my need to feel victimized. And before I get into this meditation, I want to just say something before I talk about it. That number one, it references recovery. I don't think that you have to be in recovery to take back your power and own your power, number one. Number two, I want to make it very clear that whenever I do videos and I talk about like victimizing ourselves and being a victim in certain situations, I'm not talking about really serious situations, okay? Situations from, trauma or childhood trauma and things like that, obviously. Those are situations that are very, very serious. I'm talking about more situational victimization and things like that. And every time I do a video and I talk about this, and I talk about how, there have been points in my life where I have been a victim, or I have made myself out to be a victim, and I talk about that I don't like to be in that position or whatever. I always get at least one comment from somebody that will say something to the effect of, but Peter, don't you think that it's okay to be a victim in certain situations and whatever? And like I said, outside of very, very serious situations, I think you have every right in your life to be a victim, and to say, poor me, like if you had my life, if you had situations that I'm in, like you would feel like you had it really difficult as well, right? Like you have every right to do that, okay? I don't want to take that away from anybody. The reason why in my personal life, I have a kind of a negative attitude towards victimization. And when you read a lot of like motivational, inspirational books, which sometimes are referred to as self-help, they talk a lot about the removal of victimization. And the reason why I have that attitude is that yes, there were many times in my life, right, where I was in relationships that were not healthy. And I would say to friends or family members, like, oh my God, like, this is so hard, you know, like, don't you feel sorry for me kind of attitude, right? And there were a lot of times in my life of things that I was going through where I wanted to garner sympathy from people, right? Rightfully so. I mean, I was going through difficult times in my life. I had a right for that sympathy. What I found was that when people sympathized with me and they would say, oh, Peter, this is so hard, you know, like, I'm sorry that you're in this relationship, blah, 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 whatever, right? Other than people guiding me into the direction of setting limits and boundaries within those relationships or getting out of unhealthy relationships or changing my attitude, all three of things which this book kind of recommends, other than doing those things, what would happen is I would have people that would kind of feed into that and say, oh, Peter, I'm so sorry that you're going through this, right? And then that would just acknowledge for me that what I was going through was so difficult and tough. And then I would use that as an excuse to not have to move through the pain in my life and that I could just stay stuck. And so what happened was me allowing myself to be a victim in situations, rightfully so, in some situations that were very difficult, kept me very, very stuck, okay? Now, I do believe that it is important to stay in that feeling of feeling sorry for yourself during certain situations, whether that's grieving the loss of a relationship or grieving the loss of a person in your life or whatever, right? Like, you have or a pet or a job or whatever, right? Like, you have the right to feel that way. But that being said, the goal in my life is to enjoy my life as much as I possibly can, which is why I want to continue to grow and change. So I don't want to stay stuck there forever. Like, I don't want to stay stuck in that place of victimization of, like, God, like, my life is so tough. Like, I don't want to stay there, right? And as a person in recovery, that's a very dangerous place for me, you know, because there's like a saying in recovery that, like, pour me another drink. That when I start feeling sorry for myself, I can use that as an excuse to self-harm. I can use that as an excuse to not take care of myself, right? Instead of pushing through the pain, doing the work. And I love in this meditation, when Melody Beatty says in here, and she gives examples of how we can deal with this. She says, we can own our power wherever we are, wherever we go, whoever we are with. We do not have to stand there with our hands tied, groveling helplessly. Feel sorry for me. My life is horrible. Submitting to whatever comes along. There are things we can do. And then she tells us what we can do. We can speak up. We can say, I've had enough, okay? I'm not tolerating this anymore. I don't deserve this. We can solve the problem. My friend Tanya always says to me, and I love this, like, if I'm just, like, you know, going over the same thing over and over and over again, she goes, well, I mean, you have a choice. You can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. What do you want to be? I want to be part of the solution today, and I love that she says that. Use the problem to motivate ourselves to do something good for ourselves, right? Okay, that's another one. We can make ourselves feel good. We can walk away from the situation, which is something I learned in early sobriety, you know, that I'm in a situation where I'm feeling sorry for myself, you know, as minimal as maybe I'm in a situation where there's a lot of drinking going on and I'm saying to people, God, like, this is so hard. Like, you know, like, this is not, doesn't happen to me so much today, but like when I was in early recovery, you know, like what, I'm at this wedding or I'm at this situation, there's so much alcohol here and blah, 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 and I'm just trying to do the right thing and I'm feeling sorry for myself, right? Like, my sponsors at the time and other people that had much more time in sobriety than I did would say, you can leave at any time. Nobody's forcing you to stay. Like, if it becomes too difficult, you can stay. You can walk away from the situation, right? Which is one of the most powerful lessons I've learned in life, not just with drinking and drugging, but with any situation. I have the power to walk away from that situation if it no longer is healthy for me, right? And I love that she mentions that in here. We can walk away. We can come back on our own terms. We can say, this is how I'm going to continue to live my life, okay? And you can either accept it or you cannot be part of my life anymore. We can stand up for ourselves. This is the importance of setting limits and boundaries, right? We can stand up for ourselves. We can refuse to let others control and manipulate us. Then she goes on to say, if you are in one of these situations and you can't get out of it, what do you do? And it goes on to say, we can do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. That is the beauty, the reward. If we can't do any, and then she goes on to say stuff about recovery. If we can't do anything about the circumstance, we can change our attitude. We can do the work within, courageously face our issues so we are not victimized. We have been given a miraculous key to life. And what she's saying there is that if we're in situations that we don't feel like we can get out of, for example, if you're in a work environment that you're like, okay, this work environment sucks. My boss is not nice to me, and the people that I work with are not nice to me, but I have to have this job to pay my bills, right? I don't love this job. This job is difficult for me, but I have to have this job to pay my bills. I can't just walk away from this job and quit my job, nor would I tell anybody to do that, right? I always tell people when they say something to me about wanting to find a new job, I'm like, don't quit your job before you find a new one. Like, we all have bills to pay, right? So if you're in a situation like that, there are things that you can do. You know, you can work on setting healthy limits and boundaries within that situation. You can say, I'm not going to be spoken to that way, you know? You can change your attitude about how you're going in there. You can look at what your part is in that. Inventory is so important to me in recovery because, you know, I start off looking at a resentment or a fear that I have, and then I take a look at how that resentment or that fear has affected my life. But then ultimately what I do is I look at what my part is in that, you know? Maybe there are things that I can do to change that circumstance. You know, maybe I can talk to those people directly that maybe aren't even aware that they're treating me this way and making my life a living hell. You know, I have gone to people in my life, and I've had people come to me in my past that have said to me, you know, Peter, like I had a friend of mine way back in the day, because I was such a problem solver back in the day. Anytime anybody would bring me something and say, well, you should do this, or have you thought about that, or whatever, right? And I had this friend of mine say to me one time, Peter, like, sometimes I just want you to listen. That completely changed everything about interactions that I had with people at that point. I started learning to be an active listener and not always trying to solve their problems. Sometimes people just want to vent. I'm a venter. Once I get something out, I'm like, it's over, right? And so that's like super, super powerful to me, you know, and I've had to go to other people in the past as well, you know, and say things, and they're like, wow, I wasn't aware that you think that I'm coming across as nasty, or now that you've given me examples of it, I realize that my tone and how I'm speaking to you is really harsh, you know, and I've had to take a look at that with myself as well. So sometimes, you know, owning back our power is confronting those things in people, you know, and not just using it as an excuse to get mad about something, but also trying to solve that and trying to heal those relationships. We have many options, you know, in those situations. So I think this is a fantastic meditation, and I really love that idea of owning back our power. Okay, I wanted to read this meditation, or read this question that I got in my video that was called, This is Important. And somebody asked me, Peter, is there a difference between reasons and excuses? And then they put this little emoji, right? Which I think is such a good question. I probably at times use those words interchangeably. But for me, I feel like a reason is an explanation for why something has happened in your life, or a reason is an explanation for why you did something in your life, and an excuse is how to get out of something that happened in your life. Or an excuse is kind of like making light of it or minimizing it, or just, you know, like my dad used to say to me, don't say I'm sorry. Sorry is forget what I just did. Like, I feel like that's kind of what an excuse is. But I thought it was an interesting question, and I thought, okay, I want to Google this and see, because I love the Google, and I wanted to see what people said. And so I put in here, difference between reasons and excuses. And the first thing that comes up is from LinkedIn, and it says, reasons become excuses when they are used to avoid responsibility. And I thought that was fantastic. And it says that is the key difference between reasons and excuses. And this other article has a quote, and it says, a reason for not going for a run is, I have a broken leg. An excuse is, I don't have the time, which I think is another great one, right? Justification, reason, the main function is not to justify but to explain. An excuse, the main function is to justify or defend a fault, which I think is great, right? So what it's saying is that the main function is just to explain why something happened, but when you're making an excuse, the main function is to justify or defend it, you know? And dare I share this? It's something that stuck with me for a long time that I heard early in recovery, and they say, you know, like, justification, intellectualization, and masturbation, all three are just screwing yourself. And I think there's like and I know that's kind of, you know, out there a little bit, but I think it's a really good point, you know, to take a look at that. Like, okay, when I'm justifying something, when I'm intellectualizing something, when I'm doing all of this to excuse it away, I'm really just hurting myself, because taking accountability for it and just coming out and responding to it, I think, is probably a better way, right? Now, do we make excuses, all of us in our daily lives? Absolutely. I think we all do that on a pretty regular basis, right? Like, I mean, we're human, so we're going to make excuses for things. And, you know, like even, you know, when maybe I'm a little bit too tired or whatever, I'll just say, well, I've been, you know, working so, like, instead of saying, I'm tired, I don't feel like doing anything today, I'll say, well, I've been working really hard the last couple days. That's an excuse, right? Like, that's a defense. So an excuse is kind of a defensive thing, you know? Instead of the reason being, the reason being that I just don't feel like doing anything, right? Which, like, both of those are fair. I appreciate the honesty of when, not just in taking accountability, but I appreciate the honesty. It's like, you know, years ago I learned this from my friend Tanya again. Like, you know, I would call her and I would say, do you want to go do something? And, you know, like, I have friends of mine that when I call them and I'll ask them, they'll say, well, I'm not really sure what we're doing tonight yet, which means they're waiting for something better to come along. Or, like, have you ever had that happen? Okay. Or they'll say, like, oh, I'm not sure, I got to check with this person, I'm not sure what we're doing yet, yada, 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 right? Okay. But with Tanya, I would call her and let's just say, like, I would say, do you want to go to a movie tonight? Do you want to go do this? Do you want to do that? And many times she'd say, no, I just want to stay at home tonight, you know, with my husband and watch TV and have dinner. Or no, like, I had a long day. Like, I'm just going to stay at home tonight and watch TV and relax, but I appreciate you asking me. What I learned was when she did accept and say, sure, I would love to do something tonight, like, she really wanted to be there, right? The other thing was she never needed to make excuses for not to be with me. Which I've had other friends in my past, you know, other people that I've interacted with where I've constantly wondered, are they lying to me? Are they not lying to me? When it would just be so easy for them to say, hey, Peter, like, I really appreciate you asking me, but I'm really just not in the mood tonight, you know? Like, there's no shame in that, you know? Like, I appreciate that. I appreciate that honesty. And that's not even about taking accountability. That's just an honesty between people that you love and care about in your life, just to say, I'm really just not in the mood, you know, or whatever. So I appreciate that. And I think the question is fantastic. And I think also it's an important question to ask yourself when you are explaining something to somebody, is it an excuse or is it a reason, you know? And to ask yourself that. And I think it's a good question for me that I would like to lean in to the more honest response to that, you know, and be more in the reason than the excuse. But like I said, we're all human. We're going to give excuses from time to time. So, but I think it's a fantastic question. So thank you for asking that. And it really got me wondering a lot in my head. So anyway, all right. I love you guys and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.